All right, school is in session. So take your seats and turn up the volume. It's time for the smartest fishing show on the internet. This is the show that dives into everything fishing, from tactics and gear to policy and product. Here he is, the fishing professor, Professor Sid Dobrin. So stick around, you might learn something.
Before you slip into unconsciousness, I'd like to have another fish, another flashing chance at bliss, another fish, another fish. That's right, we are taking off on that crystal ship today. Welcome to the Fishing Professor Rodcast, brought to you by Inventive Fishing. I am Sid Dobrin, the Fishing Professor, and we have got a great voyage for you today because we have the one, the only Misty Wells on the show today. Misty is the host of Let's Take It Outside, a show that I'm a big fan of because I'm a big fan of what Misty does, not only on that show, but for recreational fishing and outdoor life in general. And then on the Bourbon Break today, we'll be headed out to sea with Jefferson's Ocean. And then I'm going to get you hooked as I count down my top 10 favorite circle hooks. And trust me on this, when I talk about hooks, you'll get my point. As always, be sure to subscribe to the Rodcast by clicking that subscribe button on whatever platform you're using to access the Rodcast. And please get your friends and family hooked on the smartest fishing podcast on the internet, The Politics of Fish. Oh, wait. I mean the Rodcast. The Politics of Fish was last week's episode. The Rodcast. Get them hooked on the Rodcast. The crystal ship is being filled. 1,000 girls, 1,000 thrills, 1,000,000 ways to spend your time. When we'll get back, I'll drop a line. Welcome to the Rodcast. Let's get casting. Okay, I am thrilled to welcome to the Inventive Fishing Inshore Offshore Digital Studio today, the one, the only Misty Wells. Now, Misty is the host of Let's Take It Outside, which airs on 7 different networks, including the World Fishing Network, Waypoint Outdoors TV, My Outdoor TV, the Hunt Channel, the Discover Florida Channel, Carbon TV, and, of course, Bally Sports, which is a Fox television sports channel. Let's Take It Outside has been housed on the Fox network since 2020. And in fact, Misty is the first woman to host an outdoor television show on the Fox Sports Network. Let's Take It Outdoors is headed into its 3rd season. Now, Misty began her career as an outdoor writer and then hosted a live radio show for 2 years. And that's when Fox reached out to her and invited her to make Let's Take It Outdoors. Misty is an avid hunter, always sighting in deer, elk, hogs, turkey, duck, dove, quail, alligators, pythons, iguanas, and more. But she's also a fanatic saltwater angler with a world of experience, both inshore and offshore. And I'm hoping that we can tap into that expertise today. So, Misty, it's great to have the opportunity to talk with you again. And it's great to have you on the Rodcast. Thanks for being here.
I love it. The Rodcast. That's a lot of fun. And, you know, it's awesome because we're reconnecting. It was great having you on the radio show. Many years ago, I read an amazing article that you had written about tarpon fishing and also cobia as well. And I was like, gosh, I got to get that guy on my radio show because I learned a lot through your article and also, you know, through the interview. So it was really great. And it's great to be on your Rodcast. I love it.
Thanks. It's very kind of you. So let's start with some origin story stuff. You grew up in Clearwater on Florida's West Coast, and you've been fishing your whole life. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got introduced to fishing and how it became such a passion for you?
Definitely. You know, I'm a 3rd generation here in Florida, which we're somewhat of a unicorn nowadays.
Yeah, we are.
But you know, my grandfather would take my dad and all his brothers fishing. They loved catching pompano, different, tarpon, different things kind of in the shallow, close to shore regions. They didn't really have a boat or anything because I grew up fishing with my dad off the beach, on the piers. We'd fish on the jetties all the time. But what really kind of kicked it up a notch for me and opened up a whole new world, I was working at a hotel in the hotel business, and a tournament team of all ladies called the Real Darlings came to me, and we were talking about sponsorship. And I'm like, what, tell me about this whole world I don't know anything about. And this was several years ago. So I was able to get on the team and start tournament fishing in these kingfish tournaments. Really, any tournament that they'd let me go fishing in, I would go fishing. I just wanted to soak it all up and learn anything I could. And that really opened up a whole new world to me in this fishing life. And it's turned me into a beast ever since, or the best beast that I can be.
That's great. You've been very active in promoting outdoor activities for kids, sort of an ambassador for the importance of outdoor education. And you have 2 kids of your own whom you've introduced to outdoor ways of life, but you do so much more than simply teaching your own kids about the outdoors. You've created a program called A Real Future. That's REEL. Did I say 3 E's? REEL Future.
Right.
That introduces kids living in foster care to fishing. And you've talked about the increasing numbers of kids in foster care and in the increase in abused, neglected, and abandoned kids in this country. Could you talk a little bit about the A Real Future program and your motivation for creating A Real Future?
Absolutely. Honestly, before all of this radio, TV, and writing even happened really strongly in my life, A Real Futures was there. And this honestly is where I feel that my blessings have come from. I met my husband, Captain Tommy Larange, quite a few years ago, and he shared his story with me. He grew up in foster care, and he got given away when he was 6 years old, unfortunately, and bounced around, 16, 17 different foster homes throughout. And he was very angry, upset, and sad. And the story he shared with me is that one of the counselors kind of bribed him and said, if you'll just go to school and try and bring your grades up, then I'll take you fishing and I'll get you that new rod and I'll get you that new tackle bag. And it really changed his life. He runs a 66 Viking now. He travels all over the world. Obviously he's been a great teacher to me as well. I've learned so much, but it changed his life. So I decided basically the next day after hearing that story, I'm like, we're starting a nonprofit. We're going to work with kids in foster care and we're going to take them fishing. And to date, we have taken over 3,500 kids and growing. Summer's coming up, so that number will grow hopefully as much as possible fishing. And now, do I think they're all going to become captains or it's going to change their life? I know it does change their life even for a day, because I hear the stories. A lot of times the kids share stories with me. Sometimes they don't, but you can see it in their face. You can see what they've been through. Like, they don't even have a place to live. They have no family. So to be a normal kid for a day out on a boat, catching a fish, doing something that they would do if they had a family, and they get to be happy and be in the moment and just be focused on what they're doing, which is fishing, and forgetting about that. That's why we all love to go fishing. Sid, when you're out on a boat and you're trying to land that tarpon, you're only thinking about that. So it's such a beautiful thing to give them just a great day on the water. Some of the kids I've been fishing with for years, and then they sometimes graduate and go off to college and stay in touch, or just, live regular lives. And it's the most meaningful thing in my life for sure.
That's absolutely fantastic. It's so powerful and it's more than admirable. And I think those of us in the outdoor industry, I don't think we should ever stop saying thank you to you for this kind of work that you're doing. You talk about what fishing provides kids who are in the foster care system in terms of things like self-esteem, teamwork, and awareness for the outdoors. And, across the industry now, there's so much focus on teaching kids to fish, whether it's the takemefishing.org programs or Take a Kid Fishing. Could you talk about both as for foster kids and just kids in general about why fishing teaches self-esteem and teamwork and awareness of the outdoors and things like that?
Absolutely. I can even share it in the form of a story. There was this little boy, and he was 9 years old, and the whole group of them showed up. I was taking 20 kids fishing, and he just didn't want a part of it. He thought it's the dumbest thing in the world, wouldn't even talk to me, wouldn't participate. I tried to kind of connect with him on the boat ride out. We usually go out on head boats, just so I can take a group of them. It's a good first boat experience. And I had found out from the counselor, he had just found out that day he's never going to see his family again. I don't know all the details. But of course, imagine getting that news and then being, oh, we're going fishing. Like, who cares? The coolest thing in the world, though, is the minute he reeled up his first fish, and I had to struggle to get him engaged, but the minute he reeled up that first fish, he changed. Like, he smiled. He was like a kid, and he was happy for that moment. And maybe, obviously he's struggling, he's feeling down and depressed. And later on in the day, even though he had never fished before, there was another kid next to him that wasn't catching anything, and he was helping them. So he turned in from, having the worst day of his life, where fishing kind of made a little bit of a difference. And then in turn, he was actually helping somebody else when he was pretty much having the worst day of his life. And, I see that with the kids all the time. Just them reeling it up. They'll be like, oh, I can't bait the hook, or I can't take the fish off. And I'll do it for them. But usually an hour or two into it, they're like, oh, I got it. And then they know that they can do it themselves. And I'm not pushing them, but then they want to do it. And then they're showing other kids how to do it. So it creates that teamwork of, we did it together. I was able to bait my hook, drop it down, catch a fish, reel it up, take it off completely by myself. And it just really raises their self-confidence when, constantly they're just, the world is against them in a way, so it really helps them to know that, there are things that they can accomplish.
That is just a fantastic story. And just, like I said, we all owe you so much gratitude for this kind of work. It's just fantastic. Let's talk about Let's Take It Outdoors, which is moving into its third season. And as I mentioned in the introduction to this conversation, it's now available on Bally Sports, a Fox News or Fox Sports network. Tell us a little bit about the goal of the show and what makes it different from the other shows that have been out there for a while.
So I'll tell you a secret. It's kind of funny, because when I first started the radio show, they go in, and I go in, I think I'm mentally prepared, I'm ready for the show. And the producer's like, okay, well, what's the name of your show? I'm like, oh, I never even thought about it. I didn't even think that I needed. I'm like, I just said, hey, I left something in my truck. I'll be right back. So I go out of my truck, and I'm like, oh man, I need a name for my show. And this is, pre-TV, but so I'm sitting in the truck, and Brantley Gilbert's song, Take It Outside comes on. It's basically, he's talking about getting in a fight.
Right.
And I'm like, ooh, okay. So I write down in my notebook, let's take it outside. And I'm like, got it. So I run back in the studio, and I'm like, okay, the name of my show is Let's Take It Outside. And he's like, okay, cool. Sounds good. He's like, oh, I kind of get it. Getting in a fight. I go, yeah, kind of. So that's honestly like how it all began, from writing, from the radio show, and then, over to TV. So it's kind of a funny way. You think you're ready, you think you're prepared, but in a sense, I didn't truly know how to do everything. But I had been on a couple shows with Jimmy Houston, which, let's face it, Jimmy Houston and Bill Dance and Roland pioneered outdoor TV. None of us would have pretty much any of what's going on in this, kind of outdoor reality TV without them. So when they called me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a show? Of course, I said yes, and then realized quickly that I had no idea what I was doing. And I called Jimmy and I said, what do I do now? And he was gracious enough to kind of walk me through some things and connect me with some people. And we started season 1, and that was just, a real blessing. And talking about people that pay it forward, the 3 legends, they just do all the time, and I'm just so grateful to have met them. And I met them through A Real Futures. That's how I know them. I definitely, I'm not a person that would have those guys on speed dial and normally, but all 3 of them came down and did a trip on a headboat in the Gulf of Mexico, all 3 of them on their own dime. And we took about 60 kids offshore, and that's how we all became friends.
No, that's fantastic. I was going to ask you about fishing with the 3 of them, because what great opportunities and great experiences.
I know. It's just, I mean, and it's funny because I've fished with Roland and with Jimmy. I haven't had the blessing to fish with Bill yet, but it's always been saltwater. I've never freshwater fished, that's their forte. I don't know if I'm subconsciously trying to even the playing ground or not, but it seems like we've always just saltwater fished, and I have yet to freshwater fish with them. I could learn a lot if I did.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, I had a great conversation with Bill several years ago about why he shifted his show to saltwater and why so many bass anglers shift to saltwater, but you don't see a lot of saltwater anglers going back to bass fishing. And he talks about just how thrilling saltwater fishing is. He absolutely loves it.
You don't know what's going to happen because, I mean, you think you're setting up, you're going snook fishing or red fishing or whatever, or even especially offshore. You're planning, and of course you're a good angler and you're going to catch, the targeted species. But, I was dropping down grouper fishing in the middle grounds and went 2 for 3 on sailfish on a dead sardine. Like, that's crazy.
Wow. I love going out of the middle grounds. Gotta love it.
Oh, it's the best.
That Hubbard Marine trip. Oh, it's fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you, coming at it, I'm, born and raised in Clearwater. We're a little bit closer. And, going kind of back to Tommy, I'll be honest, he was a commercial fisherman for over 20 years. So he spent, 20 years just looking at bottom and fishing in the middle grounds and, catching thousands of pounds of fish commercially. So if you want to catch a beast and go with someone that, that's his backyard, definitely I would have to say there's a few people, Tommy LaRange, Tommy Butler, a couple other guys that I can't think of right now. But I mean, those are the guys where you better be eating your Wheaties because it's going down.
Yeah. There's no doubt when you're out there, you're working, because it's a lot of reeling.
Yeah, you're hand cranking. And I guess I'm old school. I just use, kind of my 6-aught conventional pens. And, to me, that's what works because I guess I'm used to it because everybody's like, you should use this, use that. I'm like, this works for me, so I'm not changing it.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So in the first season of the show, you had episodes dedicated to bass fishing, episodes dedicated to bottom fishing on reefs and wrecks for species like American red snapper. You had episodes from the Caymans where you fish for wahoo, yellowjacks, and bonefish. And that great pirate episode from the Caymans, which looked like it was a blast to me. You had an episode on hog hunting, an episode on python hunting, and also one on kayaking. So with this fantastic diversity of subject matters, what was your goal in that first season as the show was getting established?
So really the mission and the focus of most everything that I do is to encourage people to get outside and to do something. There's many times, obviously I'd love to be like, I'm an expert at everything I do, and wouldn't I be great? But I'm not. And most of the time I'm doing stuff on the show that I've never done before, like bow fishing, kayaking in whitewater and things like that. So really it's to show and encourage people that they can get outside, whether they're a pro or not, or it's the first time or the 100th time, to, maybe get out of their comfort zone, remind them we have to get out of our offices and we all have to work for a living most of the time. And, just try something new is what the whole thing is.
Speaking of, that's great. I got to ask you, because on that one episode from the Caymans, you kind of offhandedly say that you hadn't caught a bonefish yet at that point. Have you gotten your bone yet?
No, still trying. I'm still trying. I think I'm 8 years into it. And they've swam all around me. I've seen them. I could probably reach out and grab them if they weren't so fast. But I have yet to get my bonefish. Still,
Oh, wow.
nothing yet. I have checked a few other species off the list. I have not gotten a marlin yet. Gotten a load of sailfish. That was incredible. But no marlin, no bonefish.
Well, sometime in the coming weeks, we're going to have Dr. Bonefish on the show, and he'll
I better tune in.
Great advice on bonefish. So you maintained a lot of that broad coverage approach in season 2 with an episode or two about gators. But I have to say that for me, the standout episode of season 2 was the Sanibel Tarpon episode. It's beautifully shot during the Doc Ford Tarpon tournament. And the last time you and I talked, as you mentioned before, we talked tarpon. So I know you've got a ton of tarpon know-how. I love your short video called Chasing Silver Kings too. So let's take a step away from the show per se, and let me ask you for your top 3 tarpon pro tips for our listening crew.
Well, and again, just trial and error, of course. The very simple 101, I think that people forget because you get all excited, you get caught up in the moment, is of course bowing when the tarpon jumps, giving them that slack. And for me to understand why I'm doing it helps me remember to do it right. So when that tarpon is jumping, if your line is tight, there's a chance they're going to spit the hook. So a lot of people are like, why do you do that? So you want to bow down to the tarpon, which is giving them slack in the line. So hopefully that's why they're jumping, to get off. So they're jumping to get away. So give them a little slack in the line and bow to the tarpon. Another thing too is, as you're following a school, a lot of people want to chase them down, get in the middle of them, things like that. You usually don't have very good luck. Man, they are finicky. They kill me. There'll be hundreds around and you're just begging for a hookup and they just won't do it, But as you're kind of drifting and they're swimming towards you, you want your bait to really be as natural as possible, drifting with the current and having that natural presentation so they're not shying away from that bite. That's, something that a lot of people get aggressive. They want to get right in there. They're like, put it in their face. That usually doesn't work. You cannot push them into a bite just because a lot of times they have other things on their mind and it's not eating and they're spawning and they just don't want anything to do with it. So a real natural presentation with whatever bait you're using. Now, one thing that was really cool is we weren't getting a hookup. They're all on top of the water, but then they would go down and we would see these big mud boils under the water. You'd start seeing this brown coming up. Obviously, they're down underneath. We did some chunk bait, cut up some live bait into chunks, dropped it down and got a hookup. So even if you can't sight cast to them on the top and they're not chewing or something, look for those mud boils and then, what's it going to hurt to drop something down towards the bottom to see if you can get a hookup. And that's worked for us a few times. It's a little unconventional, but look for those variations of the water, those mud boils. And, we got 2 hookups that day doing it. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's an excellent approach. I've always heard that referred to as salting the earth. And that's how we do it, around Honeymoon and Caladisi, is to fish that way.
So that was new to me because I do so many different things. If I just tarpon fished, I'm sure I'd just, be way more dialed in. That was a cool thing to learn. And every time I go fishing with someone, ask questions, pay attention, because most of the time, they're happy to answer and kind of share some knowledge.
I think that's such an important point. I've always said that a good guide is also a good teacher.
Yes.
So I got to ask you, you did a video called Mexico Unleashed Snook Style,
Oh, that
where
was
you were
awesome.
fishing with a guy named the Grizz. Could you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that trip and the differences between snook fishing in Mexico compared with the great snook fishing we have on the west coast of Florida?
Oh man, like it blew me away. I flew into Mazatlan. Grizz had called me from Mexico. I'd never met him before, but we talked a bunch of times over the phone. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, and I miss him so much. I flew into Mazatlan. They picked me up. Never met them. I'm like, okay, I hope I'm going to be coming back, but I'm like, it sounds too good to pass up. We drove about 2 hours, kind of inland, and then went back around like to the coast. And in the morning, we would get up and we'd go duck hunting. And over there, it was just incredible. I mean, you pull a tag and you're allowed 60 ducks per tag. So we'd limit out in about an hour and a half, 2 hours with our wood ducks and our teals and things like that. We'd go get some lunch and a little siesta, and then boom, we're going out snook fishing. It's crazy. The guys out there, they don't even use rod and reels, okay? They're hand lining these 40, 45, 50-inch snook. There's no pressure. You're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's out there fishing for these snook, and they're monsters. And they're using, shrimp the size of what you'd get in a jumbo shrimp cocktail. I mean, jumbo live shrimp, and they just put it on the hook. They've got line. The line's wrapped around a stick, and they're dropping it down probably about 20 feet. And within minutes, they're reeling up these monster snook, and they just boom, flip them in their little boat. A lot of guys don't even have motors on their little boats, and they're just flipping them in the boat. Out there's not really any size limits. They eat the snook all the time. It's really good. But again, they're not really commercial fishing it either. There's not a lot of pressure. It's very untouched. Of course, we were using rod and reels, and we're pulling in these big snook too on rod and reel, because I'm like, I don't think I could, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that hand lining with a stick thing, but I'll give it a shot if you want me to. And then we were catching and releasing. So it was really funny because the guys that were fishing there locally were like hollering at us, like, they're like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing the fish back? Because they're out catching food, either for their family or there's like 2 restaurants there and stuff like that. It was incredible. I mean, just if you want to be in the 40-inch club, fish out there, because that's every day, all the time.
That video is just absolutely fantastic.
It was so fun.
So given that trip, and also given, I mean, let's face it, west coast of Florida is snook fishing heaven.
Yes.
What are the things you would advise all snook anglers to know about snook fishing?
So over here, like let's just take Tampa Bay, for instance. And, I just actually filmed a snook show in Tampa Bay like 3 weeks ago with amazing Captain Chris Wiggins. And he is the snook, him and Brett Norris are the snook whisperers. I mean, they're the bomb. So over here, you have to be careful using the lightest tackle possible, but still being able to land that fish is really important. They're very skittish and they're ambush predators. So when you're going after snook over here, you really want to look where that water flow is coming down fast. So if there's any bait fish going by, they kind of lay in wait so they can jump, and get that bite. But if you really need to practice your casting, if you're fishing over here, because you've got to cast under those mangroves in that shadow area. That's where you're going to get the bite. And almost every time, if you can get up under there, stay out of the mangroves. And that can be hard. Everybody's going to get caught up every once in a while, or a lot, let's face it. But if you can cast right in that, perfect zone under the mangroves, in where the shadow of the mangroves is, you're going to get your hook up in there. But you've got to be able to get them out quick. Obviously, they're going to try and break you off too, so you've got to be quick on the hook set and start reeling as soon as you get it to get them out of the mangroves as well. And that's good snook fishing over here. But practice your casting, man, because once you go over there and you got to get untangled and get everything out of the mangroves, they've moved on. The bite is shut down in that area.
That is fantastic advice. Okay, you're a Clearwater native, so I'm guessing you've got a bunch of Pier 60 experience and probably Fort DeSoto experience.
Yep.
Haven't seen an episode of the show yet featuring pier fishing, so I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you about Pier 60 experiences and what the renovations to that pier and the local development has done to pier fishing right there at Pier 60 in Clearwater.
So, and that's a good question. There have been a lot of development in a lot of new hotels on Clearwater Beach, and that's always a big concern, how it's going to affect our ecosystem and our fisheries and things like that. Honestly, I've done a couple trips out there with the kids, with the foster kids, and also a group of high school kids from Clearwater High, where I went to high school. And we actually caught quite a bit. We caught some sheep's head out there because they love to hang around those pilings, as everybody knows. So we were pretty successful with the sheep's head bite. There's not really, I'll be honest, there's not a lot of pressure out there on the fish. Now, if you can get out there in the evenings and fish under the lights, I want to say they turn the lights off at about 10. So you got to get there before 10. Whether you're on the pier or in a boat or kayak, I see a lot of guys, just fishing in kayaks out there. There are some very nice species of snook out there under the lights in the evenings. But like I said, we've caught some grunts, we caught some sheep's head. Some fish you wouldn't necessarily eat, of course, out there too. But just bending a rod, it's pretty active. It's not that bad. I don't think it's changed a ton. They've been pretty careful to really not pollute the area. I think they've done well with the construction, but I would really like it if I think we have enough rooms. We're good. Let's just leave it as is. But the fishing out here, it's been good. And also Fort DeSoto. I mean, Fort DeSoto is just as great as ever. It holds the bait on the piers. So it's kind of, I always tell people it's like ladies' night. If the bait's there, the fish are going to be there. So, Fort DeSoto holds a ton of bait. And you can really get some good bites, whether you're wade fishing off that pass where it kind of drops off. A lot of snook there. They cruise that line right where it drops off up and down because they're looking for bait fish. So both locations, honestly, are really, really good.
Yeah, I love fishing DeSoto, wading East Beach.
Yep.
The two piers are fantastic. So speaking of Pier 60, have you ever had the experience of a silver trout run on Pier 60? Been there when the silver trout come in?
I have not, but you know what? I've seen a lot of tarpon rolling the last couple of days over by Pier 60. We were actually just right a nighttime kind of sunset cruise for my mom. She's in town. And I mean, yesterday, loads of tarpon rolling right in the pass as you're going out Clearwater Pass before you hang a right. So right now, I don't know if you could land one off the pier, but man, they're there. They're rolling.
I have to come check that out.
Yeah. Our resident tarpon are on fire right now. And under Sand Key Bridge, a lot of people don't think about that, Sid, is right under Sand Key Bridge. A lot of people just anchor up. And when that tide's moving, you can definitely jump some tarpon in there for sure.
Yeah, I've jumped them off the Skyway too, from particularly back before they renovated the old bridge into the pier back when it was just a grungy place to fish from. So that whole area though, Pier 60, Fort DeSoto, Sunshine Skyway, these are also areas that are really well known for Spanish mackerel fishing. Can you give us some pro tips, some local tips for targeting Spanish mackerel from bridges and piers?
Absolutely. So I want to say it might have been 2, maybe 3 years ago. A buddy of ours, I'm sure you guys have heard of King of the Beach. A buddy of ours won King of the Beach with a kingfish, which I know we're talking mackerel, right at the Skyway. So a lot of people think, man, you got to burn up fuel. You got to have triples on the back of your boat, go offshore, do all that stuff. I think he won an $80,000, check fishing right there. So if you can avoid the dolphins. Last time I fished this skyway, there was this annoying dolphin hanging around, and this one boy, he thought it was really cute. He was kept feeding it. I'm like, quit feeding the dolphins. We can't catch any fish, because he'd come and steal our bait. Well, when the annoying dolphin is not there, I mean, what I would do, like fishing over there, just throw a flat line out. Make sure you have your stinger rig on. Depends on, what your setup. A lot of people come, man, they unload, they got the setup, they got the umbrella, they got the rod holders. I definitely, throw out some flat lines with some stinger rigs, and I do a little bit of both. I would put a live bait out and also just a dead bait too, because you don't know what they're going to hit on. And of course it's nice because you're on top of the water. So hopefully, you got to reel pretty fast when you get those Spanish mackerel on, because they know the drill. They know they can wrap you around the rocks and the debris down there and the pier and everything to get you busted off. But just let it go with the current. I've had about just as much success with a live bait as I had, a dead bait out there. And there's also a lot of ladyfish out there too, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great bait. So if you can hook one of those, then get that put on and throw that out as well. There's some big old Spanish mackerel out there.
Yeah, there are. There are also some, like you said, kings out there. We used to run clothespin rigs off the Skyway for kingfish with live bait.
And in the cooler months, the shallow water grouper fishing, trolling over there on, really on the I would say the east side of the Skyway. If you're facing the Skyway south,
so over by the clam bar, by the clam bar.
Yeah, there's some good potholes. I mean, you can catch some nice gag grouper in 20 feet of water over there. And you can troll, or even a lot of people do trolling with pumpkin jigs, which is my favorite, only because in an hour, I jumped and landed a tarpon, caught a 38-inch snook, and got a gag, all on the same pumpkin jig within an hour in that area.
Wow.
In the cooler months, though, the water temp's got to be cool over there.
So
I hope I'm not giving away all my secrets.
Well, it's not like those spots are not crowded.
That's true. Yeah, people are there and they know. But honestly, if you haven't trolled, you put kind of you put your planer on and just slow troll over there. Honestly, a pumpkin jig, the white color, is what I've been the most successful with. It gets the job done. And you just, like I said, I caught 3 different species on the same thing.
Wow, that's fantastic. So one of the videos you do some offshore fishing from a Sea-Doo, and you refer to it as the most extreme fishing you've ever done. Now, I've seen at the Miami Boat Show and other places more and more people fishing from these personal watercraft like the Sea-Doo Fish Pro. Could you talk about your experiences fishing from a personal watercraft like the Sea-Doo, especially offshore?
That was my first time doing it, but it was cool. I really liked it. It was not the calmest day out there, as you can see. I mean, we were like in at least 3-footers. The ride out, of course, I was questioning myself. I'm like, why am I doing this? But once we got out there and we got where we were going to fish and kind of just drift fish on the reef, it was actually really cool. I mean, you've got your live well there. You can really even kind of stand up on the side. You can cast. It was really comfortable. I wish, hey, if you're listening out there, Fish Pro people, I would love for you to give me one. But, offshore, it worked really great. I was pleasantly surprised how steady and cool it was. Like I said, you've got your live well. You had 4 rod holders. It was cool to fish on. I recommend it. And I can really see, I wish we would have had time to do an inshore segment, because man, you could get skinny in that and come in really quiet for those inshore species, redfish, snook, trout, things like that, tarpon fishing. It would be cool. I mean, it'd be cool to sailfish on that, especially on the East Coast, because they come in closer. I mean, you definitely could land a sailfish on that for sure. Now a bigger fish, I definitely don't think I'd want a shark fish on it, but I'm a fan. I liked it. It was really cool. And I was grateful. that I actually hooked one. And of course I didn't have my drag set right. And it started like going crazy, got my drag tightened. And because one of the guys had passed me a rod because I needed a different rod. And he's like, here, just take this real quick. And I, rookie move, didn't check the drag like a dummy, almost lost the fish. So, fishing 101, check your drag. But I landed it. So I recovered. I was very happy. But yeah, I'm a fan. It was cool.
Yeah, I've done a fair amount of offshore fishing from kayaks, but that Sea-Doo video really leaves me wanting to try that. That just looked really cool.
I reckon it's fun. It's cool. And I want to do it more. So yeah, I mean, and the thing that I liked about it too is, I mean, it's easy to trailer. You can put it on and off by yourself. It's like no problem, easy to clean. You can store it in your backyard or a small area. So if you don't have room for a boat, but you want to be able to go fishing and have some freedom, kayak fishing is cool. But, obviously you're not going to be able to kayak fish, and paddle 10 miles, and 3-footers out there, to go fish the reef. That's going to be really tough. So yeah, I definitely think you should try it. They're cool. And, I think Sid and I, if you guys are listening, Fish Pro, we need to do an episode and we'll take them out and go have some fun.
Yeah, it sounds great to me. Yeah. Hey, so one of the themes that emerges in Let's Take It Outside is the attention you pay to invasive species like pythons in the Everglades, peacock bass in Miami, or lionfish on our reefs. Could you talk about why you've become so interested in the impact of invasive species?
Yeah, I, especially through my work with our next generation of anglers and outdoors people, we're talking conservation, and that's part of conservation. So, especially let's just talk about the pythons in the Everglades. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, pythons in the Everglades, what's the big deal? There's already snakes and alligators out there, like kind of who cares? The Audubon Society is kind of on like red alert at this point because mammals are disappearing. And I'll be honest, when we were out there python hunting, I barely saw a bird because these pythons are able to breed and reproduce, except when they're young. They have no natural predators. And guess what? In order to grow, they need to eat. They're eating all our raccoons. They're eating all our armadillos. They're eating all our birds, because they don't belong there. So they're really messing up our ecosystem. And we may not see how bad it is right now, but I can assure you 10, 20 years from now, when a lot of those animals aren't there anymore, and God put them there for a reason, aren't there, we're going to see a big change in our climate and our environment, because there aren't any raccoons and there aren't any, a lot of those birds are gone, or they're not going there anymore. They're not able to reproduce. So we're going to see a dramatic decline in a lot of different species, especially our bird species. So a lot of people don't think about it like that, but it's something to be, thoughtful about. And like the lionfish as well. I mean, they have to eat too. So they're taking over. If there's a habitat where our snapper and our grouper and our reef fish live, and these guys, kind of like their little gang, come in and they push them out and they take their habitat, their food source, and they don't belong there, and they have no predators. And other than possibly some of their eggs being eaten when they reproduce. And I've seen a few Goliath grouper videos where they've swallowed some lionfish, but aside from that, I haven't really seen much. So, they're pushing out the species that are using that for habitat and reproduction and taking it over. So if by not introducing these, invasive species to our environment, that would, it's kind of too late now because they're there, but man, we've got to really think about what we're doing and get rid of them. And a lot of people don't understand why.
Yeah, and I think also the fact that it's not just relegated to the Everglades, that the pythons are spreading. I saw an FWC alert to keep an eye out for them this far up into Gainesville. That they're moving throughout the state.
Which is bad because they're eating. If they're moving, they're eating, they might eat your household pet. You don't know, so it's not good that they're being able to adapt and come up north I was at the park here in Clearwater in Pinellas County. There was a peacock bass at the park. It was small. I didn't have a rod and reel. I definitely would have tried to catch it. But yeah, now I've seen peacock bass up here. That's not good.
Well, you're actually anticipating my next question, which was, talk to me about urban fishing for peacock bass.
It's super fun. And number one, it's fun. Urban bass fishing for regular bass or, peacock bass is fun. In one of the episodes, we have nicknames for some of the places we go down in South Florida. We fish at the dump. There's a good body of water there to catch some peacock bass. Of course, don't want to be downwind in the summertime. Learn that the hard way. Don't fish downwind from the dump in the summer. But, a lot of these places, we're crawling under bridges. You do run into some interesting people. There was one place, Tommy's like, you might want to bring your pistol. I'm like, do we really want to catch peacock bass that bad where I think I need to bring a pistol? We may want to rethink this location, so I was like, I think, we're going to fish somewhere else, but it's fun. It's exciting. I've met some cool people. There's iguanas all over the place usually, which again, another invasive species. And peacock bass are aggressive fish. They, when they bite your hook, it. And they're very shy. They're getting a lot of pressure now, which is good. So you got to be careful not to even cast a shadow. Usually the water is pretty gin clear, where they're hanging out and where we're fishing. So you've really got to stand back to where you're not even casting a shadow on these peacock bass. They're beautiful fish, but again, taking over habitat where, different species that, are from there should be living, and they're extremely aggressive. If you have, a largemouth bass and a peacock bass going after something, I can assure you the peacock bass is going to get it. It's fun though. I love it. It
looks fantastic. I know there's now guides down there who target specifically just peacock bass fishing now.
Yeah, I follow a couple of the guys. It's fun to watch them. I have better luck, and it may be different for someone else, but I've had better luck on live bait than I have lures. I guess I just haven't found the right lure that they like. I've just had a lot of luck on live bait than I have on lures with the peacocks. They're pretty smart.
Good to know. I will make note, live bait, when I go down for peacocks. So Let me get one more question in about the show specifically, and that's, with the show going into its third season, what can we look for in season 3?
So I'm really excited. Of course, we did some inshore fishing here in Tampa Bay, which is phenomenal. We're planning another offshore trip, which is going to be exciting. In the middle grounds and beyond, I think we're also going to try and hit some blue water in that one. A lot of people don't realize, of course you have to go kind of far here, but the blue water fishing out here off the west coast of Florida is phenomenal. And this weekend, I am headed to Nashville, and I will be fishing in Luke Combs' bass tournament. I'm working on, I'm always trying to bass fish more and more to get better. I definitely wouldn't say I'm the greatest, but, getting better. So I'll be fishing with Luke Combs this next upcoming weekend in his bass tournament, and headed to Costa Rica. And I've never been to Costa Rica. So, I'd love to catch a rooster fish. That's on my bucket list. So I hope that happens. And, we're having fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we also did an elephant interaction in one of the episodes. So you guys will get to see that. So, you just never know what you're going to see, and let's take it outside. That's for sure. A little bit of everything, but it's always a good time, and it's the best job in the world.
You can pair your elephant episode with your manatee episodes.
Yeah, I know, right?
So you once again have anticipated my traditional wrap-up question, and you mentioned the rooster fish. And our traditional wrap-up question on the Rodcast is to ask, with all that great fishing experience you've had throughout your life, What's your grail fish? What's the one fish on your bucket list that you really want to get on?
Man, I really more than the rooster fish. I want to land a marlin. Come on. I've seen them. We've been out there. I plan on fishing the Loop tournament this year, which is a marlin tournament. Might be fishing the Key West marlin tournament. Who knows? Maybe I'll get one in Costa Rica. But yeah, I mean, I just want one. I just want one marlin. That would just be incredible.
Yeah, that is a fantastic grail fish. And we have certainly, through the culture of fishing, romanticized the marlin as sort of the epic fish that we all want. So
yeah, so I'd love to catch and release a marlin, any kind, white, blue, black, hopefully I'd be cool with a smaller one. That way it's not, doesn't take me 8 hours to get it in, but a small marlin of any color would be wonderful. That would be just amazing. But I mean, even if I don't ever get one, just the pursuit of one in all the different species, roosterfish would be cool, but I'm going with the marlin.
You could this chance of picking one up in the middle grounds too.
You never know. I mean, you never know. So, and that again, that's what I love about fishing in the outdoors. It's just you don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, of course, we could spend hours and hours sharing amazing stories. And I know your listeners also, they're probably thinking back to some great stories that, they share with their family and friends and their buddies. And some of the lies we tell. We love it, Sid.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's all fantastic, Misty. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm really looking forward to season 3 of Let's Take It Outside. Thanks so much, Misty, for being on the Rodcast.
Thanks for having me, and love your show. Can't wait to come back and hopefully report that I finally landed that marlin.
Oh, excellent. Well, I can't wait to hear that. Thanks so much. Woohoo! It's time for the Fishing Professor's Bourbon Break. And boy, have we got a bourbon today that ties right in with our fishing lives. Today, I'm going to take a look at Jefferson's Ocean. And as soon as I say those words, we're talking about a bourbon with some nautical connections. Like all well-marketed bourbons these days, Jefferson's Ocean has got a great story and a great connection to our concerns over ocean conservation. And yes, the makers of Jefferson's Ocean named the bourbon to honor Thomas Jefferson, our third president and primary author of the Declaration of Independence, the second vice president of the United States, the first U.S. Secretary of State, the second U.S. minister to France, a congressman from Virginia, the second governor of Virginia, and many other governmental positions that helped form this great nation of ours. But let's not focus on the Jefferson part of Jefferson's Ocean, because after all, Thomas Jefferson wasn't even born in Kentucky, so his bourbon roots run thin. And let's focus on the ocean part of the name. First, we need to keep in mind that Jefferson's has 3 primary whiskeys they sell: Jefferson's Very Small Batch, Jefferson's Reserve, and Jefferson's Ocean, as well as 8 limited editions, including an Ocean Cask Strength and an Ocean Wheated. But for today's bourbon break, we're just looking at Jefferson's Ocean. So according to the Jefferson's bourbon web pages, Jefferson's was founded in 1997, and it's the brainchild of Trey Zeller and his father, Chet. He's a famed bourbon historian. Now, the story goes that the Zeller family whiskey tradition goes back to Trey's 8th generation grandmother, who was arrested in 1799 for, quote, the production and sales of spirituous liquors. Now, the webpage doesn't say it, but old Grandma Zeller was a bootlegger. I should note that despite the romantic early days bootlegging family ties that the story of Jefferson's promotes, in the early 2000s, the Zellers sold their company to Castle Brands Incorporated, and then Castle was purchased by Pernod Ricard in 2019. Pernod Ricard is a massive French corporation that owns brands that you probably know, like Absolut, Beefeater Gin, Chivas Regal, Havana Club, Jameson, Malibu Rum, Martell Cognac, Glenlivet, Pernod, Plymouth Gin, Kahlua, and many others. But back to Jefferson's Ocean. So apparently Trey Zeller was on the deck of his friend Chris Fisher's research ship, and more on this in a second. And he got to wondering what effect aging whiskey in the hull of a boat might have on the whiskey, how the continuous rocking and such might affect the aging process. So they tried it. And after 3 years of aging, they announced that the constant agitation and changing climate of a long-range voyage imparted a sweet caramelized flavor reminiscent of a dark rum, while the salty ocean air and sea spray gave the bourbon the savory, briny character of a Scotch whiskey. And they decided this was a good way to age bourbon, and certainly a great way to promote it. So Jefferson releases its ocean-aged bourbons by voyage, like Voyage 1, which it produced about 600 bottles, Voyage 2, and so on. You should take from this that when each batch, each voyage is then inherently different from the other voyage batches. So don't expect perfect consistency between bottles from different voyage batches. Now, let me be clear here too. Jefferson is not distilling their bourbon. They source their bourbons from several different distillers. And often that means the bourbon is coming from distillers in Kentucky, like Kentucky Artisan Distillers. And at other times, it's coming from somewhere else. So sometimes a Jefferson release will have the designation as a Kentucky straight bourbon, and other times it won't. More often than not, though, you won't know what distiller the bottle you have is sourced from. One of the things I've learned about drinking Jefferson's Ocean more so than other brands is that it really is necessary to check the label on the bottle you're drinking because things change a lot bottle to bottle dependent on the batch, the voyage number, and the outsourced distiller. Okay, but before we get to the bourbon per se, like I said, there's another part of this story that's important to us anglers and ocean fanatics. That guy, Chris Fisher, I mentioned, the one whose ship Trey Zeller was on, well, that guy, Chris Fisher, is the founder of OSearch, the same nonprofit ocean research organization that tracks and monitors keystone marine species. These are the folks that track the great whites, the makos, tiger sharks, swordfish, and other species like turtles. If you haven't taken a look at OSearch's tracking webpage at osearch.org/tracker, or if you don't have the tracker app on your phone, you really ought to take a look at them. There's something really cool about being able to see where a great white or a big mako might be in relation to your own adventures on the water. I know that on several offshore trips I've made over the past few years, we've checked to see if there were any OSearch monitored animals near us. We're always hoping to catch a glimpse of the famed Mary Kay, she's just a massive great white. So yeah, the partnership between OSearch and Jefferson's Ocean is really kind of cool, and the Jefferson's Ocean bottles are aged on OSearch vessels on their expedition. So there's a good chance that the Jefferson's Ocean bottle you're pouring from was sitting forward in the hull while a really big great white or broadbill swordfish was being tagged and released at the stern. In fact, one of the things I really like about the Jefferson Oceans and OSearch partnership is that on the Jefferson Ocean web pages, they include links to the descriptions of the voyage route, and the ship's log from the voyage. The only thing I do wish that they would include too, though, is some detail about what animals they worked with. I'd like to know if they tagged sharks or swordfish or whatever else on the voyage as I drink the bourbon from that voyage. Now, Jefferson claims that for any given voyage on which barrels are being aged, the typical barrel crosses the equator at least 4 times and visits more than 30 ports. Now, in this review, I'm looking specifically at a bottle from Voyage 23, which originated in Savannah, Georgia, cruised through the Caribbean, down through the Panama Canal, and then out into the Pacific. The voyage dropped south toward Tahiti, where they ported, and then took off again for Auckland, New Zealand, then to Melbourne, Australia, Fremantle, Australia, then north past Jakarta, through the Java Sea, the South China Sea, and the East China Sea, until they ported in Masan, South Korea. From there, they steamed over to Hitachinaka, Japan, and then back across the Pacific to Tacoma, Washington, and then down to Long Beach, California, before heading south back to the canal and back up to Savannah. And the whole time, this beautiful bourbon I have sitting here was swishing and a-swaying, tucked away safely in the hull of the OSearch vessel, quietly aging in the ways we wish we could all age. Now, even though it was back in 1997 that Zellers and Chris Fisher began the Aged at Sea experiments, it wasn't until 2012 that Jefferson's Ocean became available to the average liquor store drinker like us. During those early years, Zeller and Fisher only aged 3 barrels per voyage as an experiment to see how it would turn out. What they got was a darker bourbon that had a characteristic of a dark rum that were evident not only in the dark color, but also in the sweeter flavor. Because Jefferson's Ocean is a sourced bourbon and usually a blend of different bourbons, one of the things we don't get to know with each bottle is the mash bill. And of course, that means whatever I say here about the bottle I have from Voyage 23 may not accurately reflect the blends from other voyages. Now, I dig the clear lines of this bottle. It's like a big glass flask, and the text work is clean, not overbearing, with a silhouette graphic of the Osearch vessel. I like that the label doesn't conceal seeing the bourbon within. I get really frustrated with some bourbon's packaging when the label keeps the light from flowing through the bourbon and you can't get a sense of the coloration of the bourbon, which can often be a telltale about what's inside. Now, as to coloration, the Jefferson's Ocean has a tint of brown that, as I noted before, suggests a dark rum, but not entirely. There's still a lot of gold color here, a honey shade like honey on toast, so still very bourbony in color. The nose of the Jefferson's Ocean Voyage number 23 is sweet like vanilla and caramel. Since we don't know the mash bill, I can only speculate, but given the sweetness of the nose, I'd bet on a rye-heavy mixture. That sweetness is complemented by a hint of smoky wood here, too. The palate is also pleasantly sweet, still nodding to that rye-heavy blend. That sweetness alludes to some citrus, too, and a tad of spice. But it's really that caramel sweetness that dominates throughout. There's some smoky wood at the back end, but not enough to lay claim to the dominance over the sweetness. Overall, the palate is very pleasant and soft. I want to say that the softness manifests in some floral flavors, but it really is more of a vanilla or caramel softness, which is fine by me because I tend to equate those flavors more with Caribbean flavors than floral flavors, and that just makes me want to associate this taste with warm ocean waters even more. Now, I have to admit, too, that I'm probably buying into the marketing here more than the flavor. That is, I really enjoy this bourbon, but I have to let myself let go of any desire for a dynamic bourbon flavor and accept the sweetness and the mythic voyage characteristics as what makes me enjoy this bourbon. It shows most of its flavor neat and tends to fade a good deal on the rocks. I haven't mixed it with anything. I usually don't, but I imagine it would fade in flavor even more with mixers. Look, there's no doubt that the aged at sea aspect of this bourbon is what makes this a unique drink. If this were just another sourced blend bourbon that didn't have the tie-ins to Osearch, or if it wasn't aged at sea, I'd probably review this very differently as just a medium quality blended bourbon. But man, there's something about the mystique of this bourbon, about aging in the hold of the Osearch vessel that makes me elevated in my assessment, and that's okay. It's like telling yourself that the Cuban cigar you're smoking is somehow a better cigar, even though you enjoy your Ybor City roll even better. So look, Jefferson's Ocean is good, and if you take the ocean connection to heart, it's very good, but it's not great. And yes, you might want to take into account, too, that Jefferson's Ocean runs about $90 a bottle. I've seen it as low as 80 and as high as 115, but figure to pay about 90. That makes it tough to just be an average bourbon. It would be a real good bourbon at $50, but it's a $90 bottle, so it's a good bourbon. It is certainly a great bottle for talking points, for telling the story, and for getting your friends to weigh in on whether they think the salt air, the perpetual rocking, and the equatorial climate changes affect the taste. My recommendation is to get a bottle or two from different voyages, compare them, read about each voyage, and have fun with these bottles. Keep one or two in your galley. So those are my thoughts about Jefferson's Ocean. Oh, and as a final note, and as my regular disclaimer, as always, please keep in mind that the Fishing Professor Bourbon Break reviews are not sponsored. The distillers have not sent me samples, nor do they influence my reviews at all, though I am, as always, open to sponsorship, bribery, and extortion. The bourbons I review are purchased out of pocket, and my pocket, and my reviews are based on my keen sense of bourbon know-how developed over many years in many of this country's finest watering holes, drinking establishments, dives, pubs, honky-tonks, and back alley speakeasies. Hey, speaking of, let me give a quick shout-out to Humpy's Great Alaskan Ale House in Anchorage. Man, how I love drinking there almost as much as I love eating there. I could go for some halibut nuggets and bourbon right about now. And like my friend the pilot used to say, it is better to be a well-known drunkard than an anonymous alcoholic. As always, if you have comments about this week's Bourbon Break, feel free to email me at sid@inventivefishing.com. And now let's get back to the Rodcast. All right, it is time for this week's top 10 list. And this week, I thought we'd take a look at my top 10 favorite circle hooks. Now, picking favorite circle hooks is tricky because the companies that make hooks usually make a variety of kinds with different uses for each. So it's tough to just say something generic like, I really love Company A's circle hooks, because their light duty hooks may not live up to their heavy duty hooks. And add to the fact that the circle hooks are used in so many scenarios, ranging from inshore deadbait fishing to offshore live bait for billfish and so on, that things can get confusing. Now, if you want to learn more about hooks in general, you can check out my article in the February 2022 issue of Florida Sportsman magazine called The Point of the Matter, Catching Up on Hook Styles for Florida Fishing, which is really applicable to fishing in other places besides Florida, too. So this week's top 10 is a bit unorganized, and then it combines lighter use hooks with stronger use hooks, sort of combining inshore light tackle use with nearshore and offshore heavier use hooks. So it may seem counter-logistical to rate, say, a light gauge hook as better than a heavier gauge hook, but that's what I'm doing here. Plus, there are variations in circle hooks with offset versions, inline versions, wide gap versions, octopus versions, barbless versions, and so on, that all add to the overall complexity of choosing circle hooks for a given scenario. Nonetheless, let's get to the point of this part. The point. The point of this part of the Fishing Professor Show is to start counting them down. So at number 10, I'm thinking about Mustad's Ultra Point Demon Wide Gap Circle Hook. I love the range of applications of this hook since Mustad makes them in a range of sizes. I love the black nickel finish on these hooks too. And their blonde red is a great version also that I find most useful in inshore fishing, particularly when fishing for redfish. But really, it's the strength of the Mustad's Knorr tempering wire that leaves me confident in this hook. It's a true wide gap design, and Mustad's point grind, which they call 4.3 Ultra Point technology, is razor sharp with an opti-angle needle point. Really great hook. So at number 9, I've got Gamakatsu's Offset Octopus Circle Hook. This is a really popular hook that has earned a reputation as a great live bait hook. I like the eye-up design of this hook for snelling and the black color of the hook. Of course, like all Gamakatsu hooks, the wire is super strong and the hook is beyond razor sharp. All around, it's just a great, dependable live bait hook. All right, at number 8, I've got Offshore Angler's lightweight wire circle hooks. But I want to be clear, too, that Offshore Angler, which is the saltwater division of Bass Pro, also has an inline heavy wire circle hooks and inline circle hooks more generally. At number 8, I have the light wire circle hook because these are the versions of the hooks that I've used mostly for inshore fishing situations. I like the lighter gauge on the wire in the hooks and the sharpness of the hook. Plus, because they're Bass Pro house brand, the price of these hooks tends to be a little bit lower than most other comparable hooks. So if you're going through a lot of hooks or fishing with kids or novices, I like to go to these reliable but sort of disposable hooks for mass use. All right, at the number 7 position, I have got Eagle Claw's Laser Sharp L197B Barbless Circle C Offset Circle Hook. What a mouthful, like a hook. And of course, you can't talk about fishing hooks without giving nod to Eagle Claw's preeminent position among hook manufacturers over the years. I think most everyone I knew as a kid had a sleeve of those Eagle Claw hooks in their tackle box. But yeah, their L197B Barbless Circle C Offset Circle Hook is a reliable, smart hook design. I love this barbless hook when I'm fishing strictly catch and release because the circle design induces safe corner of the mouth hookups, and then without the barb, the hook removal is easy. This is an offset hook too, which adds to the security of the hookup. For me, this is one of the best hooks for fishing for bonefish, for instance. All right, and number 6, I'm going to turn back to Gamakatsu and their Big Eye circle hooks. This hook is made from a high carbon steel wire and has a great sharp point. Now, I point this out because this hook, it really is a derivative of Gamakatsu's standard circle hook, with the eye of the hook expanded to make it easier to tie heavier leader lines. A lot of times, regular sized hook eyes just can't accommodate larger diameter mono leaders, which can be crucial when, say, live baiting for anything from sailfish to snapper or chunking for tuna. So my number 6 is really a great hook, but it's the big eye that makes it worth recognition. All right, sitting at number 5 is Owner's SSW Circle Hook. Now, if the Gamakatsu's big eye is here because of its big eye for rigging, then the Owner SSW Circle Hook is here because of its up eye design, which is designed for easier snelling. That said, though, the Owner SSW hooks are made with a really strong light gauge wire. The hook has a medium shank and is what you might think of as sort of a slightly offset hook, because the offset is only about 4 degrees offset. I also have to say that I've always found Owner hooks to really live up to their claims of corrosion resistance. That said, let's stick with Owner hooks for the number 4 position as well in the countdown, and I'll give the number 4 spot to Owner's Mutu Light Circle hooks. Now, these hooks have a bit of a sharper bend in the circle, which makes these hooks great for live baiting. And while my experience with these hooks has been running live pinfish, greenbacks, and pogies mostly, Owner does promote these for live baiting in freshwater as well as saltwater. I also use these hooks in a size 1 for live shrimp for all kinds of inshore fishing, ranging from mangrove snapper to speckled trout to redfish and even bonefish. It's a really dependable live bait circle hook. Okay, at number 3, I want to come back to Mustad and their 39960D and 39965D circle hooks. Now, like other Mustad hooks, the 39960D and the 39965D circle hooks are made with a super strong wire designed for big game. These are inline hooks, but what really gets my attention with these hooks is the really short shank. The hook is designed for live baiting, and the short shank keeps the hook profile very low within the bait, keeping the hook tight to the bait without a shank sticking out away from the bait. I like that low profile aspect of a hook when live baiting for bigger fish, whether on the bottom or higher in the water column. All right, in my runner-up spot, I want to praise Diachi's Bleeding Bait Circle Wide Gap Saltwater Hooks, which are manufactured by TTI Blackmore Fishing Group, a phenomenal tackle company. I think I've become more reliant on the Diachi Bleeding Bait Circle Wide Gap Saltwater Hook for most of my inshore bait fishing than more than any other hook. What really turns me on about these hooks is that they are kind of a hybrid hook that combines a wide gap hook design on a traditional circle hook design. That combination makes it easy to hook baits because of the wide gap, and then helps ensure safe corner of the mouth hookups, which I find useful when fishing catch and release for trout and redfish in particular. I also think that the red coat on the hook gives the visual impression of a bleeding bait. Just a great hook. I try to keep a box of these with me when fishing inshore. They're very reliable and very dependable. Okay, that's the top 9, with my number 1 circle hook still ahead of us. But before we get to the big reveal, let's do a quick recap of the first 9. At number 10, Mustad's Ultra Point Demon Wide Gap Circle Hook. At number 9, Gamakatsu's Offset's Octopus Circle Hook. At number 8, Offshore Anglers Lightweight Wire Circle Hooks. At 7, Eagle Claw's Laser Sharp L197B Barbless Circle C Offset Circle Hook. At number 6, Gamakatsu and their Big Eye Circle Hooks. At 5, Owner's SSW Circle Hook. At 4, Owner's Mutu Light Hook. At 3, Mustad's 39960D and 39965D Circle Hooks. At number 2, Diachi's Bleeding Bait Circle Wide Gap Saltwater Hooks. And that brings us to my favorite circle hook. And this is a hook that the first time I saw it, I was literally taken by the beauty of this design and wanted to wear one as a necklace, like so many anglers wear Maori hooks as jewelry. But I realized that the point of the hook was so ridiculously sharp that I couldn't wear it as jewelry unless I ground down the point and the barb, which I never did. Jewelry aside, though, I fished this hook quite a bit reef and wreck fishing, as well as live baiting for sailfish and kingfish. And I'm talking about my number 1 circle hook, and that's the Gamakatsu Nautilus HD circle hook and Gamakatsu's Super Nautilus saltwater circle hooks. These are some of the strongest hooks I've encountered, with some of the sharpest points I've used. I love that they also come into heavy-duty Nautilus version that is a bit more stout, and then the Super Nautilus, which is just a horse of a hook. That's the one I wanted to turn into a necklace jewelry. It's also become my favorite blackfin tuna hook. I also like that you can get the Nautilus series hooks with rings in the eyes, making them easier to rig with wire, and also gives more freedom of movement to the hook when live baiting. So yeah, the Gamakatsu Nautilus series comes in as the fishing professor's #1 circle hook. And that's it for this week's Top 10, one of the sharpest lists I've done so far. As always, don't forget that if you have comments or questions about my top 10, please feel free to email me at sid@inventiveFishing.com. And as always, if you'd like a Fishing Professor's Top 10 about a particular fishing-related thing, just send me an email and I'll see about adding it to my list for future top 10s. And as a reminder, my top 10 list is not sponsor influence, since I have no sponsors. Woe is me. Well, as I feel the blues setting in, and not in that good way when the surf comes alive with a fantastic bluefish blitz along the coast of the Outer Banks. No, I have them deep down, low down blues, what we all get when we find ourselves at the end of another episode of the Fishing Professor Rodcast. Hey, I want to thank Misty Wells for taking the time to join us on the show today. And with all seriousness, be sure to check out Let's Take It Outside. It's a fantastic show, and Misty is one of the best at teaching us about fishing and other fantastic outdoor skills, habits, and ways of life. She is hands down one of my favorites in the business. So thanks, Misty. Thanks for being on the show today. Of course, I hope you enjoyed that Jefferson's Ocean bourbon voyage we took, and I got to say that writing that review left me with a new life philosophy, because now I want to be like Jefferson's Ocean and age slowly on the bow of a boat, cruising the world's oceans, getting a deep bourbon-colored tan and getting smoother with age. I do hope, too, that my sharp top 10 list of circle hooks pricked your interest and spurred your interest like a thorn in your thumb. Hey, before I sign off today, I do have a message for our brothers and sisters out there behind the line. The outrigger has sprung. I say again, the outrigger has sprung. And that just about does it for this week's episode of the Fishing Professor Rodcast. Be sure to look for next week's episode, which will drop on Wednesday next week, and I hope you will check it out, and I hope that each member of my listening crew will get out there and recruit more listeners to our weekly rating program. And of course, if you have comments or questions about anything on this week's show, or have recommendations for future top 10s, bourbon breaks, interviews, or information about a specific fishing related issue, please feel free to email me at sid@inventivefishing.com, or leave a reply in any of the comment sections for any of the podcast platforms you use to listen to the Rodcast. Be sure to follow Inventive Fishing on Twitter or Instagram, and friend us on Facebook at Inventive Fishing, and be sure to check out all of the great video content over on the Inventive Fishing YouTube channel, which includes great gear reviews, new product introductions, and a mess of other golden content. I will be back next week with another episode. Until then, this is Sid Dobrin, the Fishing Professor. Fish on.
The Fishing Professor Show is copyrighted by Inventive Fishing, LLC. Any rebroadcast of the podcast without the consent from Inventive Fishing, LLC is strictly prohibited. Fish on!